Alright, we are moving on today. So we are learning how to add integers. But we're not just adding like 2 plus 3. We know how to do that. We're going to learn how to add negative integers and positive integers. Okay? Good. Alright. So let me talk. We have a song that's going to help us remember it. If we can memorize this song, then we can always get the correct answers. Okay? So everybody knows row, row, row your boat, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, you do. The song says same signs, then you add, different signs subtract. Keep the sign of the larger number, then you'll be exact. So we are going to sing this as a nice, perfect little choir.
Every day?
Oh.
Maybe. Maybe. We're going to sing it for sure today, though. So, everybody get ready. On the count of 3, at a normal level, we're not going to scream it, we're not going to whisper it. We're just, like you're talking, you're going to sing it. Alright, we ready? 1, 2, 3. Same signs, then you add, different signs subtract. Keep the sign of the larger number, then you'll be exact. That was so wonderful.
I could not sing.
Huh?
Hey, we get it.
Kaden, stop. Stop. Alright. Bring it back in. Calm down. Dylan and Naya.
Did you hear that laugh?
What?
Did you hear her laugh?
No. Alright, moving on. So we are moving on from the song.
Can we do it at the end of class?
No, maybe. We'll see. Alright, so if you can remember this song, it literally gives you all the steps you need to do in order to add integers. Okay? So study that song. Let's know it. Let's memorize it. Alright, so if we're adding integers with the same sign, we are adding their absolute values. So what does absolute value mean again?
A positive.
It's always positive. So that means you're going to be adding positive numbers even if it's negative, just so it helps us. Okay? So, once you add their absolute values, then you're using the sign of the integers in the answer. So, let's look at an example. -3 plus -5. I'm going to add their absolute values. So, that means I'm adding +3 and +5, which gives me +8. But that's not my answer. Now I want to look at the signs. So, looking back at the original problem, which has the larger absolute value, -3 or -5? -5 has the larger absolute value. Okay. -5 has a negative sign with it. So that means your answer is going to have a negative sign with it. So your answer is -8. Also, if you look at that, they're both negative, right? -3 and -5. So your answer is going to be negative as well. Just the same as if you're adding 3 plus 5, your answer is always positive. So if you're adding 2 negatives, we're going to get there. Okay. So if you're adding 2 negatives, then your answer is always going to be negative as well. Okay. Just like 15 and 2. Positive, positive, same sign. So we're adding. Sign of the larger number is positive, so it's going to be 17. Okay. That one's easy. If we're adding integers with different signs, that's when we're subtracting their absolute value. Up there in the song, it says different signs subtract. So if they're different signs, we're still subtracting that absolute value. So example, we've got -10 plus 3. They're different signs. One's negative, one's positive. So that means I'm subtracting their absolute values. So their absolute values are still 10 and 3. So 10 minus 3 gives me 7. But then you still have to go back and figure out if it's positive or negative. So the 10 or the 3 had the greater absolute value. The 10. The 10 is negative, so that means my answer is -7. Okay? Yes. Just like 18 plus -2. Can y'all see that? Let's slide it up. I want to add those absolute values. So what's the absolute value of 18? 18. Am I adding them or am I subtracting them? I'm subtracting, right? Because they're different signs. One's positive and one's negative. So I should 18 minus, what's the absolute value of negative 2? 2. Positive 2. So 18 minus 2 is 16. And then when you look at the larger absolute value, in this case that was 18. 18 was positive. So that's why my answer stays positive.
Wait, so the biggest number, just not from like
what sign it is. Yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry.
All right. We're going to learn how to do it on a number line as well. So, this one is done for us. We're always starting at 0, and then we're going to move in whichever direction that they're telling us to move in. Okay? So, let's look at negative 5 plus negative 7. I'm always starting at 0, so I'm going to draw a line at 0. So, everybody needs to be doing this on their paper. The first number is negative 5. So that means if I'm looking for negative 5, am I going to the left or to the right?
To the left.
To the left. So that means I'm going to go to the left 5 units. I'm going to put a little dotted line there. From that negative 5, I'm adding negative 7 to it. So that means I'm going to go to the left 7 units because it's a negative 7. So from there, I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Wherever you end up, that is your answer. So where did I end?
12.
Negative 12. I ended at negative 12, so my answer is negative 12.
But you started at 0?
Yes, you always start at 0, and then you move in the direction of the first number. So the first number is negative 5, so I went to the left to negative 5. And then from there, you go to the second number, which was negative 7. So you don't just go to negative 7. You have to go 7 units in the negative direction. So that's how I ended up at 12. Chase. Yes, you can, but we're learning how to do it on the number line. That's what we're doing on the number line. Okay. All right, let's look at that other example. Negative 10 plus negative 4. So where do I start at?
0.
0. So I'm drawing a line at 0. Negative 10 is my first number. So I'm going to the left all the way to negative 10. And then I'm adding negative 4 to that. So that means I'm going to the left again 4 units. And where do I end up at?
14.
Negative 14. So that is my answer. You can check that. Same signs, then you add. So negative and negative. That means I'm adding 10 plus 4 gives me 14. They were both negative, so my answer is negative as well. Negative 14. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
So what if there's a number that's bigger than the number?
Then you would draw the number line that's bigger. I drew them to make them large enough. So you're going to draw the number line that you need to draw in order to solve the problem. Yes?
How do you use this number to go backwards?
The very first one in the problem. So since negative 10 is first, that's the first one I'm doing. Does that make sense? All right, flip over. Now we're adding integers with the same sign. Without the number line. So we're practicing without that number line. So we're using our song again. Negative 26 plus negative 17. So they have the same signs. They're both negative. Same signs. Then you add. I'm adding their absolute values. So 26 plus 17 gives me 43. And then I'm going to look and see which one had the larger absolute value, and that's what sign. So in this case, they're both negative, right? So my answer has to be negative 43. If you're adding two positive numbers, answer is positive. If you're adding two negative numbers, answer is always negative. When it really matters, if you're looking at that larger number, it really matters if you're adding different signs. So if you're adding a positive and a negative, that's when you have to look for the larger number sign. Okay. All right, negative 14 plus negative 16. Do I have the same sides?
Negative 30.
So same sign, so you're saying I'm adding them. I don't want to do the absolute value right there. I'm doing the absolute value. So then you have 14 plus 16, which gives you 30, but they were both negative. So y'all said the answer was negative 30.
Yeah.
23 plus 38, do I have to do anything specific for that?
Nope, 61.
That's just easy.
Yep.
Because they're the same signs, right? They're both positive, same signs, then you add, keep the sign a larger number. So that's why it always works. Questions on that? Adrian, will you flip that arrow on for me? Flip it up twice. Or down twice, sorry. It's kind of hard, but you won't break it. And then one more time. So it's on low. Hard. Flip it one more time down. You flipped it once. Just flip it one more time.
It's cold.
Okay, I'll look at it.
It's on low.
Okay, it's fine.
I feel like it's going low.
So high. All right. Additive inverses. Do we know what that is? Probably not. An inverse is an opposite. So another word for inverse is opposite. So if I have the number negative 2, what would be the opposite of negative 2?
2.
Positive 2. So anytime that you are adding those inverses, you always get 0. Okay? So 5 plus negative 5, they're inverses of each other. They're opposite. Always gives me 0. 5 plus 5 would give me 10. 5 plus negative 5 gives me 0. So anytime you're adding the opposite numbers, it's 0.
You had to make it a real 5.
Okay, think about this. You have 5, positive 5, 5 fingers. And then you're adding a negative 5, so you're taking away 5. So how many do I have?
0.
None. 0.
But I thought you said the inverse or whatever is negative 5.
Yeah, the inverse of negative 5 is 5. The inverse of 5 is negative 5. So when you add those inverses, you get 0. Okay? So just like if I had negative 7 plus 7, you get 0. Okay? 100 plus negative 100, you get 0. Okay? All right, adding our integers with different signs using our number line. So same thing, we're still starting at 0, but on the front we moved everything to the left, right? Did we move anything to the right? No. This is where it comes different. 6 plus negative 7, so I'm still starting at 0. My first number is 6, positive 6. So that means I'm going to the positive direction. 6 units. And then I'm adding negative 7 to that. So what direction would be negative? Left. So that means from my positive 6, I'm going back to the left 7 spaces. So I know all the way to 0 would be 6. One more would be 7. Wherever you end, that's the answer. So negative 1. Yes, ma'am.
So like before you even start problem, you just answer like the regular problem, and then once you get, then you see like where it's not at.
Yes, we are learning how to use the number line to solve it. That's the only reason why we're using the number line. Normally, you will just solve it normally. 6 plus 7 gives you, well, 6 plus 7, you've got different signs, so you would subtract, right? So then you have 6 minus 7, which gives you 1. Keep the sign of that larger number, so negative 1. Okay. All right, last one. I'm starting at 0 again. Always start at 0. The first number is negative 15. So that means I'm going to the left, negative 15 spaces. And then I'm adding positive 19 to that. So if I'm adding a positive number, which direction am I going?
Right.
To the right.
To 4.
So I know if I go to 0, that is 15. So then add 4 more to that, and you end up at positive 4. So your answer is positive 4. Questions on that? All right, flip over. adding with different signs, now without that number line. So we're using our song again. Same signs, then you add, different signs subtract, keep the sign of the larger number. So 7 plus negative 1, I'm subtracting because I have a positive 7 and a negative 7. So 7 minus 1 gives me 6, but then I have to go back to that original problem and see which one was the larger number. In this case it was 7, and it's a positive 7, so that means my answer is a positive 6. Okay. Negative 8 plus 3. They're different signs, so I'm going to subtract their absolute values. So the absolute value of 8 is 8. Absolute value of 3 is 3. I'm subtracting them. So I get 5. But now you got to look to see what sign. So which one had the larger absolute value? The 8, the negative 8. Since it's a negative, that means my answer has to be negative. So it's negative 5. Okay. Got it? Alright, this last one is when I have three numbers, so more than just 2. We got to remember those properties so that we can solve it. Do we remember our properties? Okay, so if I've got 2 plus negative 15 plus negative 2. Alright, so first thing I can do is I can use that commutative property, which tells me I can switch the order of those numbers. I can switch to change that negative 2 to come where the negative 15 is. So now I have 2 plus negative 2 plus negative 15. Okay. And then I can use that associative property that tells me I can group numbers together. So I'm going to group the 2 and the negative 2 together. And then what are 2 and negative 2?
0.
The sum of them is 0. Those are your additive inverses. So 2 plus negative 2 gives me 0. So now I'm left with the problem 0 plus negative 15, which is what property? The identity property. Anything plus a number, or 0 plus anything gives you anything. So your answer is negative 15. So when you have more than two numbers, you can group things together to make it easy to get 0 if you have any of those additive inverses. If you don't have any additive inverses, that means you would just do 2 plus negative 15 and find that answer, and then add negative 2 to it. Okay? Alright, 10 plus negative 12. Same signs or different signs? Different signs, so am I adding or subtracting? I'm subtracting, but I'm going to subtract their absolute values. So what's the absolute value of 10? What's the absolute value of negative 12? So, in this case, 10 minus 12 will give me what?
2.
Technically, it gives me negative 2, right? But, is that right? It is right, actually, in this one. Even if you still look at the larger absolute value, which was 12, it has that negative sign with it, right? So it tells you your answer has to be negative anyway, so it's negative 2. The bigger absolute value. So, yes, negative 12 is smaller than positive 10, but you're looking at the greater absolute value. So negative 12 has a greater absolute value, so that's the one you're looking at. Okay. Alright, H. Same signs or different? Different, so I'm subtracting. I want to subtract those absolute values. So absolute value of negative 13 is? Absolute value of 18. Here's where it comes a little, you might think it's tricky. 13 minus 18 technically is negative 5, right? But remember, the only reason that we're subtracting 13 and 18 is because we took those absolute values. So 13 minus 18, we're just going to always have a positive number when we're subtracting or adding those absolute values. Because the answer, you've got to find out if it's positive or negative from this original problem. So which one had the larger absolute value?
18.
18. Was 18 negative or positive?
Positive.
Positive. So that means your answer has to be positive. So it's positive 5. Okay. So don't let that trick you. The only reason we're doing 13 minus 18 is because we found the absolute values. So yes, technically 13 minus 18 is negative 5. But that's not the real problem that we're solving. The real problem we're solving is negative 13 plus 18. Okay. So you always want to go back and make sure that the sign is with whatever that larger absolute value is. Does that make sense? All right, what about this last one?
14 plus 6.
Can I group two of the numbers together to make it a little bit easier on my life?
Yes.
Negative 6.
Negative 14.
Yeah, if I group that negative 6 and 6 together using that associative property, I can solve that first, right? So what is negative 6 plus 6? That is 0 because that's my additive inverse. So now I have the problem negative 14 plus 0. What property would that be? That's my identity property, which leaves me with just negative 14. Oh, I'm sorry.
Wait, why did you go with 6?
Because it made my life easier. Because you can do negative 14 plus negative 6. But you're going to have a number, right? Where here, if you do negative 6 and 6, you know that that's 0. So it just makes your life easier because you don't actually have to add anything.
So if you had this the other way, you would still get the same answer.
Correct.
I didn't know 14 plus
Yeah. You can still do it the other way and get the correct answer. But if you notice those additive inverses, then you know that that's 0. So it just makes it easier. You don't have to actually add any numbers. Right? Questions on any of those notes? Not too bad, right? As long as you remember that song, you should be good.
Can we sing it again?
While I'm passing out our work.